Welcome to this week's Workplace series, and this is the last one for 2024. Now, with the summer break just around the corner, you can feel like you're just crawling to that finish line. And so at this time of year, we all face those days when we can find ourselves up against fatigue and what feels like that impenetrable mind block. This thought of starting something new, coming up with a different idea, a different angle, or being able to approach something from that different perspective just feels way too hard. It was the esteemed economist John Maynard Keynes who said, and I'm quoting, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones." Now, it can absolutely be hard to let ideas go. But when you're tired, when your motivation levels are lower than they would be normally, thinking up with that fresh idea, it can just feel elusive. It's like your brain's battery. It's drained. That charging station has stopped working. So what do you do if having a doona day isn't an option? What do you do if actually you're not having a summer holiday? You're pushing through because you've got deliverables that need to get done. Here are some things to think about. Firstly, recognize that motivation lever. We have this curious notion that motivation somehow just appears. It doesn't. The motivation arises once you've started. So when you don't want to do something, the best thing to do, sit down and start whatever it is that you need to work on. And I'm sure this takes discipline, but what you're going to do is set yourself like a mini goal, and you'll say to yourself, I'm going to work on this for 15 minutes. And after that, I can have a cup of coffee, or in my case, a cup of tea. By that 15-minute mark, you're likely to find you're going to keep going, or that task is near completion. Next, tap into both sides of the motivational levers. Back in the 1970s, psychologist Edward Deci ran an experiment, and that experiment demonstrated how incentivizing students with money to solve problems actually made them less interested in working on those puzzles after they'd been paid. However, the students who weren't incentivized by money worked on the problem for longer and with more interest. What Edward Deci's work demonstrated is the difference between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic comes from outside sources, intrinsic comes from within you. So if you think about pay rises, promotions, winning, status, fame, all of that, that's extrinsic. In contrast, when you're doing a task or achieving something because of your purpose, your desire for growth or curiosity, or just for pure enjoyment or self-expression, all of that is an intrinsic form of motivation. Author Daniel Pink talks about how extrinsic rewards only work for non-creative behaviors and much less so for work that requires innovation and unconventional thinking. The challenge as well with always relying on those extrinsic forces to motivate you is that they're primarily outside your control. As socialized beings, it's really easy to fall into that trap of social comparison. And when we compare ourselves to others, it can demotivate us. It negatively impacts our self-esteem and can leave us searching for more because we don't feel like we're enough or that we have enough. However, when you focus on why something matters to you and you make it matter, that intrinsic motivation is going to kick in. Next, expand your definition. It also helps to challenge your definition of idea generation and creativity. So, do you think about being creative as coming up with something completely new? Or can it be taking something that someone else has created and making it better, improving on it in some way? For me, creativity is both because it comes in many shapes and sizes. Consequently, rather than labeling yourself as non-creative, it's time to seek out structures and activity that can help you tap into your creative ability to find new ideas. The challenge is we so easily label ourselves. We convince ourselves that we're not the idea person, and we can also easily box people around us into that category of creative or non-creative. And yet we all have the capacity to be creative, just in different ways and to different degrees. For example, you can find an idea by reshaping, adding, or subtracting from an existing ideas. The best ideas aren't always starting from scratch. Sometimes a tiny tweak or an alteration can turn an average idea into an awesome idea. Next, notice your value. Psychologist Paul Bloom wrote about how we value things that involve hard work and effort in his lovely book, The Sweet Spot, The Pleasures of Suffering and the Search for Meaning. In that book, he recounts research from Duke University that was based on an experiment. And in that experiment, participants were given either a pre-assembled product or the parts and instructions so that they could create the product themselves. They were then asked to value the item. What was interesting is the researchers then found that the product's value increased when it was successfully self-built. In fact, the participants who assembled their own item were willing to pay 63% more than those who got the pre-assembled product. Incidentally, this is actually known as the IKEA effect, and anyone who has successfully assembled something from an IKEA flat pack will know how good it feels. Next, explore what's different. Consider taking up a hobby or an activity that's utterly different from your day job. This is going to activate different parts of your brain. It's going to help you create new neural pathways and capabilities. A recent study at Harvard University found that people who do better at creative tasks often have more creative hobbies and achievements. In that study, the participants were asked to complete a test of divergent thinking. This alternate use task test involved people thinking of new and unusual uses for everyday objects. The study also identified the different areas of the brain that are used in creative activities. And they concluded that the creative brain is wired differently and that creative people are better able to engage brain systems that don't typically work together. As part of all of this, I'd really encourage you to read widely. If you only read from one genre or style, you're going to narrow that field of view. You want to expand your boundaries, look at different ideas, different sources, because when you do that, you're able to then bridge connections and see dependencies, which are going to be really helpful for you. Now, a couple more to go, so keep staying with me. Shift yourself. When you're feeling stuck, when you feel that you're tired, just move. Move to a new space, a new place, because when you do that, your brain shifts and you are going to think differently. And as part of this, get moving. When we move and exercise, we all know this, we release endorphins and they can help spark new ideas and thoughts as that tiredness of the day, that stress of the day can start to dissipate. Maybe have a buddy or a colleague that you do this with as well. Lastly, and this is really important, manage your energy. Your brain needs a break. So there are going to be times when you're tired. One of the best things you can do is take a little nana nap or sleep on the problem. Sleeping or resting is often the catalyst for that new idea to come forward. When you step away from the busyness of the day, we're creating space to think and to see things differently. That's why new ideas and perspectives often arise when you're on holiday or during the middle of the night. So it can be really helpful. Keep a notepad by your bed. So if you wake up and you start thinking about something, write it down. This is your subconscious brain processing. With all of this, I'd really encourage you to just create some space. And I know when you're busy, it feels really hard to do, but just a little bit of space can make a huge difference in your working day. I hope whatever you do over the coming weeks, you have a wonderful time. And if you do get to have a break, take care, and I'll see you in 2025.